On the air, Harvey. Today is
February 7th, 2022, corresponding to Zion Adar 5782.
Zion Adar Aleph, which is Moshe
Adar,
Rabbeinu's anniversary, Yortzeit, and his birthday. Okay, so last week we started this topic, which the more I look into it, the bigger it becomes. The issue is we've been talking about Lashon Kodesh and English names and things like that. So I assumed that there has to be a lot of discussion about translations of different svarim into English, writing svarim in English, and especially the super ambitious project that ArtScroll undertook to translate the entire Shas into English. So I started looking around. So I found a little bit here, a little bit there. I pasted it together, but then I stumbled on there's a journal called Or Yisrael, which I'm familiar with because I published a few articles there. The author the publisher is Rabbi Oberlander from Muncie, and he wrote an article about Timtum Halev, whether if somebody. There was a whole scandal, if you remember, about 15 years ago. It was a butcher shop that was a sense in Muncie. And the question was, the people that ate that meat, relying on the hashgacha, was there an issue of Timtum Halev? So somebody showed me that he wrote an article, and I had my own views on it. So I wrote to him my own article, and then he published a word that I didn't even know before, teguva, which means
reaction,
a response, a reaction. So we went back and forth, and then after that, I published a few articles there. So I saw that there's in the 50th edition of the Or Yisrael, I guess it's an old magazine, for many years, there was a extensive discussion about this about ArtScroll. And then I searched up on top of my bookcase, and in the back blew away the dust and the cobwebs. And lo and behold, here I'm looking so hard. Here's the sefer that the volume. There must be about 40 pages about ArtScroll. That's the theme, ArtScroll. And it's if I could spend 4 or 5 shiurim on it. It's a very fascinating read. If you're interested, I could lend it to you. But I'm just going to touch on a few of the points that are made in this journal, and some of the things that I collected last week. So first, maybe I'll start with this page, because this is here. If you can hand this out. This is the single page, Bob.
Yep. The English one?
No, this one's not English. This is just one single page.
Okay.
It was or two sides. You'll have it as 2 pages, but it's really I printed it out as 2 sides to the page.
Okay.
So this will sort of set the tone for the discussion here. This is a article that was written by Rav Mordechai Leib Garelik, who I figured out after reading some of the back and forth that he's a son of Rav Yerucham Garelik, who was a very well-known Rosh Yeshiva and Yeshiva University. So, and Rav Yerucham Garelik had a reputation of being a big kanoi. He was a brisker, but nonetheless, he was able to acclimate himself to the modern Orthodox environment of Yeshiva University. But he was oftentimes critical of things that they did in YU. So his son, he has a few sons. I know one son is the Rosh Yeshiva in South Fallsburg, Chaim Ozer Garelik, and then another son, I think, is a Rebbe in Philadelphia. So this is Mordechai Leib Garelik. He's in the yeshiva of Beis Moshe. So he writes as follows: Ba'avo Neseinu Harabim. You write it.
The Borough Park, is that what it says?
I don't know what that stands for. The Borough Park, maybe. Ba'avo Neseinu Harabim. You right away know where he's headed when he starts with Avo Neseinu Harabim in there with our means to say that because we've sinned, so terrible things are happening. Chadashim Mikara Bo, the Izu B'Dereinu Zed. There is new modern inventions, and people were arrogant. Levazos es Torasenu Hakadosha. They humiliated the Torah. V'tfisu pirish shelahem al tamid mashalo hechzifu af echad mehacharedim b'hadara shivnei. Nobody had the chutzpah to publish a translation of the Torah, at least not from the Charedim in previous generations. V'af shezeh business atzum, you know, they make a lot of money from it. Kavanasam klomerisht. Klomerisht, I think, means ostensibly. L'shem shemayim, l'harbatzes Torah b'chal Yisrael, shetehei haTalmud easy to learn. Shavu chol nefesh. I'm glad you figured out that Hebrew expression. V'zeh tos be'ikar hadas, bikri hadas v'yisad Torah shebal peh. It's a fundamental mistake. The shiny Torah shebal peh means Torah shebechsav. Torah shebal peh is different than Torah shebechsav, and he quotes the Tanchuma. Shekol mi she'ohev osher v'tainig eni yachol lilmod Torah shebal peh. If a person indulges in wealth and pleasure, he can't learn Torah shebal peh. Shemi'ikar t'no'eh lo nitna lilmod ela ba'amala. Torah shebal peh, a condition of studying Torah shebal peh is with diligence, v'yigia, and you have to struggle and work hard to try to understand. I should, hey, may miss asbel, like Rashi and Chumash says, other kemas ba'ol, they have any terms kind of misha may miss asbel. HaTorah shebal peh eino hefker lakol. Not everybody could learn Torah shebal peh. V'mein yigoyim ba kol tzorcha nasis hagemara atzma l'sama mavis. If you learn Torah without much effort, then it becomes a sama mavis, a poison, which would not only take care of Art Scroll, but it would also be the Daf Yomi movement. You learn a blot a day. So then he says, in the next paragraph, he says, he quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says that the Gemara is where you understand things. You extrapolate from one situation to another. So he says in the next paragraph, it's not for nothing that there were these organized learning groups where they would learn simple things, Ein Yaakov or the Mishnayos or Chai Adam. Somebody that knows that he can't delve into learning Gemara with in depth. So he should learn something light, and it'll be yotzi the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And then he says, "Mekubal v'yidush Chavetz Chaim hiskin lebsof takanas Daf Yomi rak klape ruach hamaskilim." Very reform. The Chavetz Chaim was really opposed to Daf Yomi, but because of the maskilim and the reform, the Chavetz Chaim reluctantly agreed to put his endorsement. Kadesh tikva b'chlal Yisrael shal kopanim atamahu yisod hadas ubeis chayenu. Inkam makom l'harach. That's what he claims. So he's this
even harsher is where he says afal pi shelo yavinu klum.
Yeah, afal pi shelo yavinu klum.
Basically, they're not going to get anything out of it.
Right.
Anyway, right.
So he was heavily attacked in the subsequent articles for his presentation. First, he makes it appear. First, the statement he said the Chavetz Chaim was opposed to Daf Yomi that was strongly contested, and that the Chavetz Chaim expressed.
Right then and there, he called Meir Shapiro.
Yes, he had great respect for Meir Shapiro, and the Chavetz Chaim expressed great admiration for people learning Daf Yomi. And then the statement that he makes that Torah, it's true that Torah Shebal Peh, the way to study it is with diligence. That's why we say Lasik b'divrei Torah instead of Lilmod divrei Torah. Lasik means to learn. Lasik means to learn with struggle and intensity, but that doesn't mean he's saying that therefore somebody who can't learn that way shouldn't learn. He shouldn't learn Daf Yomi. It would be better not to learn Daf Yomi, and it would be better not to learn Art Scroll or to use an Art Scroll Gemara because you don't. As he described it before, easy to learn. It's an easy read. You can sit back on your armchair. So a number of the subsequent authors here attacked him for that, and he sort of backtracked and he said he didn't mean to say that the people shouldn't learn. He meant to say that we shouldn't make the Talmud into something that's easy to learn. But of course, the people, if they can't learn in depth, they should learn. There's nothing wrong learning superficially, although his language doesn't seem to imply that at all. But in the end, he sort of withdrew some of the comments that he made. But the fundamental thing that is significant is that Art Scroll allows the person to learn without struggle, because you don't have to make a laning, you don't have to figure it out. You read it. It's in English. So, and the next piece here.
Well, wouldn't that be like, I want to get off track, but when Rabbi Teitz Pinchas used to give Moshe Motzi Shabbos,
Right.
How many people learned that? That was the same thing. It was just not Art Scroll in print. It was
That's
just
right.
people
That's
who,
right.
who otherwise could not learn.
Yeah,
Gemara at all.
and everybody, and also everybody goes to a shir. It's spoon fed. That's how.
every Gemara.
Okay,
was like that.
there's not there wasn't much support for his contention here, but the nonetheless there are those that felt that Art Scroll, the people that are already learning Gemara, it should not be something that you could sit back in your lounge chair and zoom through. It should be more. It has to be more of an intense learning. So in the
I
bottom.
don't see how Art Scroll is just armchair reading. I mean, you still have to concentrate and figure out.
That is true,
the Gemara.
right.
Even with the explanations,
That's true.
you still have to follow it.
I doubt that he ever used an Art Scroll, so he does. he doesn't know. It's true. The Gemara is inherently difficult, no matter what translation. That's what Cincino was the translation, but nobody was able to. You couldn't figure out the Gemara from the Cincino. So Art Scroll has the advantage of footnotes in the bottom. So the footnotes are oftentimes rather complicated. They're not always so easy to figure out what they're saying in the footnote. So this next person, Rav Chaim Rappaport from London, I don't know who this is. This was published 15 years ago, so I don't know who these people are or if they're still alive. There's a bunch of people that wrote. So he says, "Where I have the bar, Vishanim Achronos, Yotze Kamar Rashi Yeshiva Rabbanim Betainos." The Tawanos, Miyucha Negeg Gemara's Art Scroll. There were many people that Rashis came out and they criticized Art Scroll. Because Olaim Shlayalo Yavo, but they can say about Midrashos V'chon Shomer Nafshi Yirchak Mehem. They didn't allow Art Scroll in the yeshivas. I think it's true that in like in Lakewood they didn't allow Art Scroll, but that was because it would have been like a bizayon that. The guys in yeshiva learning Art Scroll. I mean, it doesn't look good. The optics.
Was it May Menucho something? The toast was the first came out in the '70s.
Yeah, that was from Nachman Kahana.
There was the same thing. How could you have spoon-fed the toast?
Yeah. They point out there's a whole bunch of there's something in the 1800s called the Madrich, which was a forerunner of Art Scroll, which was it took select sugyos and it explained them so that the people could learn them.
Didn't let you use the jastro. You got to use the orach. All right. I mean,
that's right. They didn't want you to use the jastro either. It was a bizarre. You had to keep the jastro under the table.
It's really not. This is just a continuation of the same kind of.
Yeah. All right. So he says. The second paragraph. The first objection is it's something new. Our forefathers didn't learn from such Gemaras. I lost the line here, but then there was another taina. One taina is that it's different. I'm telling you last week that the machine matzahs, there was tremendous opposition to the machine matzahs. The main reason was because it's new and it's not traditional. It's not part of the even Fiddler on the Roof understood the importance of tradition. So they made a whole song about it. That's what I remember from my youth. But that's always been, and I mentioned last week that especially the Hasidim are much stronger on their concern that they're for Chadash Asim in the Torah because they the way they live is an insulated type of society, and they have their own minhagim, and they dress differently, and they're very suspicious of new innovations. On the other hand, I showed you last week, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was an enormous innovator. I mean, most people don't even know, but he had so many radical ideas. So he wanted not only he wanted to get 100 rabbanim to take 30 dapim a piece and translate that into German or whatever language, and then he wanted it studied in university. And he said he knows that people are going to have tinus on him. That how could he teach Torah to the guy? And he says, I have a response. It doesn't say what the response is. I'll tell you later what I think the response is. But so that's the first thing that they're objecting because it's something new. So there's suspicion. I mean, look, the truth is that there could be a danger if you erratically change the religion. Then he says, "Hengarmas lamaitis amo v'sayikia." So the second time is that people it does there's no hard work involved. There's the Trumas Hadeshin had a Talmud that wrote that in his time somebody invented a table on a that spun, and you could when you had a lot of svarim they're using, so you
Right,
put it
so
on the
you don't have to
table
finish down.
and then you could spin it around. You had more space that way, and when you needed a safer you didn't have to stand up, you just all you had to do was spin the table. So he said you shouldn't do that because it's because they're making it into too easy an exercise.
So, Rabbi, how is this any different? This is supposed to be Torah Shabbal Peh, so it shouldn't have been written down to begin with, the Mishnah, Gemara, etc.
Yeah, so the
But
Gemara says it was written down because it was going to be lost because of all the
Correct.
persecutions. Okay, so but now that it's written down, so we can learn it in its original. We don't have to make it into something that's so easy. Okay, look, the counter argument I'll tell you in a moment. Avo Kanira Tlunasim Hikarim Shah Menagdim Gemara said the middle column. Egohi Shegramas Artscroll Hamiro as Perish Rashi. And a major complaint is that if you use Art Scroll, you don't learn Rashi because it's a Perish Chodesh Mishalem. It's the new commentary. Instead of learning Rashi, why do you have to learn Rashi? You could learn the commentary. And and then he says the next paragraph he says reading Art Scrolls like a Korei Be'iton, it's like reading a newspaper. So that was that's what he's just quoting the tinies. Then he wrote about 20 pages disagreeing with the tinies. In the next side of the page, Tshuva l'tainosayim. He responds to all the tinies at great length. He says, "Taram enal tainisel active amashim tainosayim nechonosayim yeshusel gamas gemaras uvar shel mesifta oz v'hadar mishel Shas lubin." These are translations that came out in Eretz Yisrael, concurrent with Art Scroll, and those I guess are held in higher esteem. So if you're gonna trash Art Scroll, you have to trash those as well. He says, "Keep b'shlosh mikahani tos." You have the same three issues. Davar aleph davar chadash also. It's a new system. Beis bittul ha'amal yigia. You're not going to struggle with it. And Gimel gramal aziv esalim yiyam ha'malkim b'pirish Rashi. You're not going to learn Rashi. So he says, and he responds to these tainis. He says, first the taina that it's chadash. So he says in the bottom of this column, if you examine it, it's not a taina. The copy taina is chadash. There was already these things were done already earlier generations. Shehatira as sefer hamadrich albamas yama talmud. There was a sefer called hamadrich. It was a way. The goal of the sefer was to teach you how to learn. V'od chiburim k'mos v'tam v'nimukam imam k'fi shibsal kama barucha u'komo according to Sfira Gedol Yisrael the yesh makom l'chadesh targum and perushim atzmudim l'gemara atzma. Obviously, Gedol Yisrael held that there's room for innovation, and each generation has its own needs. Kashin is smart halavavas niskat people are not as smart and they're not as inspired. V'dafka mitnei shektatnam shal rishonim ava mimasneinu v'yachas l'archam areinu u'bnei kechamorim. We compared to the rishonim, we're like donkeys. We need all these svarim. We need translations. You have to address the generation, and there's a. I mean, the truth is, if you attended the Siyam Hashas in Madison Square Garden, it's very hard to say anything negative about Art Scroll because you had 100,000 people there. If you wouldn't have had, and just in one place and around the world, if you wouldn't have had Art Scroll, maybe you would have had 5,000 people. And so, how could you I mean, this was written maybe before when there was only 20,000 people in Madison Square Garden, but it opened up Torah Shabbal Peh to the masses, and that's a fabulous thing. So it's true that somebody that could learn on his own, he should without Art Scroll, he should, but it doesn't mean. So what is he saying in the next paragraph on the bottom right? What about the complaint that you don't have to struggle? The Gemara says, "Avu bali batim matrudim b'parnasim echam misman v'koich." He said, "Gay b'tar." It's a necessary thing that there are people that need these tools. And then look at the bottom paragraph. It says an interesting thing. But the mi yemar shetzricha matalmidim as miskashem bo b'limudim. We say, "Gay harbe al perish milos." A lot of the struggle in learning Gemara is not struggling with the ideas or concepts. It's struggling with the language because it's written in a foreign language. So if you're using a Jastro, so you have to spend an hour every day looking up a whole bunch of words and then writing them in pencil on top, so you won't feel like. Uvalos as koyimei mavanas pashtus the Gemara. Hare lechore yesh makom lomar the mutav sheyavinu setevis shakavitaya b'shuta b'li yiviser. It's better they should understand what the text says without having to struggle. V'yinatzu zmanam v'kishosem. He's like, yeah, b'yigi atzuma l'havin omi to Gemara. If they want to learn in depth, learning in depth is not to figure out what the words mean. Learning in depth is to take the concepts and try to understand them. So that's why he doesn't agree to the second taina, and then the third taina was
Kapi taina
shlisha shemiros divrei Rashi shenichtu b'ruach kodesh b'divrei mecharim b'nei zmanenu hine tainizu kolcha yafa klapi el asher nirpim heim u'v'nahamad d'kisuv v'nichu. That's a good taina for somebody that's lazy. So why is he not using Rashi? Bashir b'klal zeh who shows was limit b'divrei Rashi. Someone's calling name b'gemaras and b'vuras. Avo elu hatalmidim hamishtamshim b'gemaras and b'vuras k'dekayos. But it's somebody who needs art scroll in order to be able to learn the hainu rak b'tor reishes das. In order that they should help them have an introduction to learning Gemara. The goal is that they should be able to learn on their own. It's like you're teaching somebody how to swim. So when they start, so you let them use a float, but afterwards you take it away. And he says at the end, 4 lines to the bottom. We see this tremendous value. How could you ask the printers to stop printing them? Because of the lazy Talmidim, they use Art Scroll as an armchair Gemara, even though they could learn it in a traditional way. So you're going to take it away from everybody else. That's not. It's not. You cannot do that. What does he say in this last paragraph? So there he says. Okay. So look at the second paragraph on the left side. He says. He's talking about what Regrel said. Regrel is saying that Torah doesn't belong to the masses. It only belongs to the select few who know how to struggle with Gemara. I don't know who that is. And they don't withhold any amount of struggle. That's the pasuk in the beginning of Yeshaya. Who asked you to come to my temple and trample on it? Better they shouldn't learn. Then it's better they should learn Chayadam, things like that. So I didn't even copy the rest of it, but he totally disagrees with that. How could you say that Torah doesn't belong to all of Klal Yisrael? And people have different madrigas and different levels of studying Torah. But here you see this is a synopsis of the three main times. One is that it's new. The second is that there's minimal effort, and the third is that you're going to end up not using Rashi instead you use the footnotes on the bottom of our scroll. Okay, let's go to this.
What about this Rambam thing you quoted here with the Samamavis? Is that?
No, he deals with that. He does. He says that, I don't remember what he says, but he doesn't let it fly. Okay, then if you have the booklet that has the English. Oh, do you have? Yeah, I gave it out from the beginning, right? Where this booklet that has the English on the first page. So if you turn to first I wanted to show you the art scroll was very careful. They worked very hard to have endorsements from a lot of rabbanim. In the beginning of Maseches Brachos, they have around 20 letters of endorsement from different rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas. The on this page, on page 10 of this booklet here, they have a haskama from Shlomo Zalman and from Rav Yashav, where I have it underlined on the right side and the bottom. So you can't do better than that. If Shlomo Zalman or Rav Yashav endorsed it, and then Rav Moshe also endorsed it, actually on the next page, page 10. But then on page 11, the Rav David Feinstein wrote a haskama. Art scroll, when it started, Rav Moshe, when each volume they printed on Chumash and on Nevi'im, Rav Moshe wrote a letter, and each letter was a little different. He says, now you're doing Kehelis, and now you're doing Mishlei, and it's wonderful, and the first one that they printed was Megillas Esther, and they have a beautiful letter of approval from Rav Moshe to the to Rabbi Zlotowitz and Rabbi Sherman.
At the time the first article came out,
What?
at the time the first article came out, they had those quotes from Rav Elyashiv and Rav Shlomo Zalman, but at the time they did not get a quote from Rav Shach.
No. So Rav Shach was opposed. That's I didn't copy that, but Rav Shach was the one that was most vociferous in his opposition to Art Scroll. And another thing that I didn't copy. One of these authors is also critical of the positions that Art Scroll takes. For example, Art Scroll quotes from Sham Shavuot Hirsch that the Tanaim and Amoraim relied on scientific information of the times. That's a very controversial. That was Dr. Rabbi Silifkin's position. That was a tremendous controversy at the time when he published it. And many of the Gedolim were opposed. Said that Rav Yasha said that even though Rav Sham Shavuot Hirsch was a great person, but we don't hold that way. So Art Scroll, I checked. They quoted it in Chulin in the 9th parak. I checked in the Art Scroll here, which is a new version. It's not. They took it out because why do they need to be controversial for it? If you start to look for the Art Scroll translated all of Shas. So he found 3 places where he didn't like what they wrote. So but here you see in the letter on page 11 from David Feinstein, he says, Basi B'tor, on the right side, Basi B'tor Bra Mizaka Abba, I'm coming as a son who's being Mizaka his father. Ki Yadu Kol Adoni Avi Mori Rabbi Chivev Masha Osin Cheves Art Scroll. Moshe had this very strong affection. Melacha Atika Pirushin Usfas Agas. They translated the Melachas Hatoka. They translated. They actually enhanced the beauty of the fonts, and they translate to English. Every time they printed a new sefer, he wrote a new haskama. So Rav David says, it was obvious to him that Rav Moshe would have certainly given his endorsement to translating Talmud Babi. So you had here Shmuel Kamenetsky, and on the bottom is Rav Schachter. Rav Schachter suggested to them they shouldn't say it's a translation of Shas, because that implies that there's a new version of Shas. He said you should say it's a commentary. So they actually, in deference to that, if you look at the page before, instead of using the word translation, they use the word elucidation with an annotated interpretive elucidation as an aid to Talmud study. So they wanted to make it clear that. Okay, so let's see. So this is the contemporary criticism, but all these same tinus you can find if you go back further in the Chuvas over the years, because there were various efforts to, and there's more tinus that they had that we discussed last week. Here's a tshuva from Rav Aaron Walken, who was a rav in Poland, and I believe his grandson was a rav in Queens, Rabbi Walken, and his great grandson was a chavrusa of mine in the Mir Yeshiva. He's in Eretz Yisrael now. So he says like this. He says this was written in Tafresh Sadik Zion. That was around 1930 or so, I guess, something like that. So he says
Where are
Al-Dvar.
you reading from, Rabbi?
Oh, it's page 12 of the book with the English in the beginning.
Okay.
So he says Al-Dvar she'ela she'nishalta michacham Yerushalayim mutal hatik sifrei hamishnayos l'svas hamedina. Are you allowed to translate the Mishnayos into the vernacular of the country? In order, so there's two different reasons why somebody would want to translate the Gemara. One is for the non-Jews and one is for the Jews. So this person wanted to translate it for the non-Jews. He doesn't say why, but based on the other things that I read, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta wanted to translate it for the non-Jewish population because there was so much misinformation about what it says in the Talmud, in the Torah. And we remember last week there was this fellow. Oh wait, it's in this booklet. There was the first person that tried to do a translation was this Dr. Pinner, and his in the 1800s, and his main motivation was also to show the anti-Semites, the things that they say they think is in the Talmud. Because for the guy, they have this the elders of Zion who are hiding out in some cave, plotting and controlling the whole world. So their impression was that Talmud, there was no real translation available for them to know what it says in Talmud. So they conjured up all these ridiculous ideas, including blood libels and support, etc. So he says he says initially I thought maybe it could be matter. The hine shorish din zel b'sechus chagiga. Damar Ravami ein mosim de Torah l'nochri. She never magad Yaakov. The Ravami says you have to give over Torah to a non-Jew. Uvitosis avio sham b'shem Rav Elchanan hakshis ma husrach Ravami l'krad the divrei Kabbalah the magad Rav Yaakov. Why did he have to derive it from that pasuk? Magad Rav Yaakov typically be deraisa. It's a deraisa because the Amar Rav Yochanan b'Sanhedrin Gaisha also b'Torah chayiv misa chol hamalam le'over b'fnei iver l'sita milsham. So there's an issue deraisa to teach a. So he has. I thought I would read it, but it's too much material here. What he says is there's two dinim. There's one din that you're not allowed to give over Torah to a non-Jew, and there's another din because it belongs to Klal Yisrael. And if a guy studies Torah on his own, he's stealing the Torah of Klal Yisrael. And then there's another halacha that you're not supposed to teach a guy Torah. But so he says that the halacha you're not supposed to teach a guy Torah is only if you teach him in depth. The things that are Sisrei Torah, he has a basis to say that. But and the first halacha that the guy is not allowed to learn Torah is even if he learns on his own, he's not supposed to learn Torah. His basis for saying it's only Sisrei Torah is because it says Gai she'oslik b'Torah. It doesn't say Gai shalomei Torah. It says she'oslik b'Torah. But it said the other Isser that you're not allowed to give over Torah. That's an Isser on us that we're not supposed to give Torah to the guy. And the guy's not allowed to take it his own. But if we have a justification to give it to the guy, then the guy's allowed to learn it because it's not gzeila, it's not stealing it from us. And he says so. If there is a reason to let him learn Torah, and we decide to give over the Torah to him, and it's light Torah, it's not in depth, so then there would be no problem. That's what he goes. He's the whole pilpul here. But in the end, he says, look at the left column. He says. He says nonetheless. He says you see the Klal Yisrael didn't want to translate the Torah. The way to be Mashma Chazal Mesechus Sofrim. We have the bar Pamachas B'Shah Shenichta Torah Yavanas Tamei Amel. When they translated the Torah into Greek, Hayom Tzara Yisrael Hayom Shenasa Ha'egel. It was a time of crisis. Umakam Achar Amish Hayel Choshech Ba'olam Shloshim. It was 3 days of darkness. So he says, why was it such a terrible thing? And this was Torah Shebichsav even. Kavanasim Shekol Hagalos Hamar This is such an interesting thing that he writes. The reason why Galus has been so bitter, and the eyes, the darkness that has engulfed the Jewish people, it primarily comes from non-Jews. They know how to creep into the words of Torah. Uvechartumam hischilo lenaker lechatei telimtzot dvarim shelafi katsu. They found things that, according to their understanding, they didn't understand it. They make fun of the Torah. And this is one of the main causes for the Taurus. So he says, why we have to go back into ancient history. What we experience ourselves. This Pranasitis, I looked it up in Wikipedia, which is the most authentic place to find anything. Justinus Pranastis. He was a priest, and Bishas Bira Mishpash Beilus, when they had the Beilus trial, and Beilus was accused of a blood libel, that he murdered a Christian girl in order to be able to bake matzahs. So this guy, Justinus Pranastis, presented himself as a super expert in Talmud. And he was the one that shared with the court evidence from different places in the Talmud that the Jews believe in using the blood for baking matzahs. So I saw it actually in the article in Wikipedia. It said that they in the end they were able to decimate his testimony, because the defense attorney started asking him questions. He wanted to know what certain words mean. He didn't have no idea, and then he asked them, "Where does Baba Basra live?" so he said he's not sure where does she live. He says he wasn't sure. So he says asking where Baba Basra lives is like asking somebody where is the Gettysburg Address? What's the address for the Gettysburg Address? So he didn't know. So it became clear to the court that he was fabricating things, and he really didn't have any knowledge of the Talmud. But he's saying that if you're going to open it up now and you're going to offer translations, you're giving free entry to them. He says v'kamat tzaras inuyam v'gzeres ros garlando hakomer Chechik. There's another priest that B'Gzeres Shchita. He was the one that was able to get them to outlaw Shchita. Because he knew a little bit. They don't understand Torah at all. He was able to instrumental in bringing all sorts of terrible decrees, the anti-shchita laws, v'tzaras naros. Who's to blame? It's people that shared information about Torah with these individuals. Superficial, right. Tremble, so he says, I tremble to think, how can we, this person wanted to translate the Mishnayos for the benefit of non-Jewish world. He said, how can we do that? We'll give, let's say, Schar B'Yadam. They're gonna slaughter us with their swords. Kosle Beis HaMishpat HaLublini, the courthouses in Lublin, Asher Sham Yishpat Ke'ez Mishpat HaShetiki, that's the one he mentioned before, I think, Chechik. Yochicho al Amitas Advarim, it's proof of what I'm saying. Had Kodo HaKomer Azeh Nishma Ke'ez Gam Bekosle Habayis Azeh. Or maybe this is another person, Pashti Tiki, I don't know what he did. You shouldn't, after all the heterim that he has, he says it's dangerous to give access to the Talmud to.
Aren't going supposed to learn at least the Sheva Mitzvahs?
Sheva Mitzvahs Neinoch, yes, but it's all, they can learn one parak in Sanhedrin. They don't have to learn the whole.
Okay, that parak would have to be translated for her.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so that's. Let me get another booklet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What about it?
They'll finish with this, yeah. Here,
Which one did you get one? I will get them.
So here, this is a tshuva from the Arugas Habosem, who was the Chusta Rav, and the Arugas Habosem, somebody asked him the same type of question, but he wanted to translate not for the non-Jews, but for the Jews. On the bottom right, where the bar is. The Hatik is Sefer Ein Yaakov. He wanted to translate Lashon Ashken. He wanted to translate Ein Yaakov into Yiddish. Tzachel v'kala hamaduber barov v'glilos midisena v'osias ashiros. Hein kol yakar rasa eino b'michta pituch kosher. So he saw the letter that the Tzanzer Rebbe wrote. V'divros kachel melavos ashtus umarim b'kolos uvrokim alosin shebikla v'hatvis b'yom sefer Yaakov im hatokas asher. The Tzanzer Rebbe was fire against doing that. And then let's skip to the bottom of the page here. He says, it's delivering the vola. So what does he say on the top of the page? What's the main objection? On the top left. They want to make the stories that are in the Mishnah, in Yaakov, which is Agadita, they want to make it like the historical stories. Also be ameno. V'siyim sham igraso maran hagon hakadosh mitzan. The Tzad Rebbe says, "V'muto lahakos al katkad amkei stiyim v'udaiti yifarsem divrei kachul lachak al kol harabim be'eit barzel." It should be publicized, the position of the Tzadzer, that it's usher, and then he says v'anan. Look at the next one. Vanan manena basar hagonim hadir ma'ego. Mash maus kvot dima benafsha she yashir mi b'chutz kol ha'maymar masher yitnu makom laminim litos. To leave out the difficult gemaras where people who are apikoros they misrepresented. Lufi daita ein zeh limros daita shel hagon hakadosh. The Tzanzer Rebbe's opposition was only if you're going to translate difficult gemaras, but not if it's the easy ones. Also, adarach motzim midei averhalo b'divrei kachim shagon manah yesh behem dai verlovin kilo al agadas hatmios b'vad keeping the divrei arum kukulam achi. So they were opposed to translating anything in the Gemara. Okay. I thought, and so he says the same thing. He says. The last line of the bar. Also, we're going to also motzi and diba amash aimbo diba. The Gaim are going to use, even if it's simple gemaras, they'll manage to find things that are objectionable. Okay, then I wanted to show you. Here, let's see. This is from the Sefer Mishana Halachos. This is Rav Nasha Klein. This is a contemporary posek who died about 10 years ago, I think. I sent, if you saw, I sent a picture of Rav Nasha Klein. He wrote about 13, 14 svarim. He wrote Mishnah Halachos, and in many different volumes he covered a tremendous range of topics. So he says, on the right side, the bottom paragraphs. Dalcha ahuvi. He says v'dar she'laso. Amashlo retzisi gulamedes b'nei yeshiva anglis. V'asvasa medina mayesh lefaka. He didn't want to let in his yeshiva that they should teach English. So he says Dalcha ahuvi yedidi shaharbe yesh lefaka b'daras hakolim l'fnei l'lamdu v'asvasa medina b'nei Yisrael. Oh, you know what? This is not what I wanted to show you. This has to do with what we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Whether you should be speaking English or not. So he's opposed. He says you should speak Yiddish. But look at on the next column. He says Umashahimsi li akun. This is to Elimel Shapiro. Mashahimsi li akunchis ha'angli lo yanti bo. It's translation English. I said I didn't read it. Ki ein daiti nochu lichtov halachos ba'anglis. This was a sefer somebody wrote with halachos in English. Ufarsim itona v'yotzibo. And then you put it in the papers. Shemulvad shatar nitna b'ashuras uvanega yesh b'zeh shiyur hagayim dvarim she'en lefarsem. The end will be that the Goyim will study it. Shemisham yilvado l'sinas Yisrael. they will come to hate more anti-Semitism. And if I'm akosim miskaven neged hakarim shimsuchem einayim or mishumei v'lo yichol lichto kalacha kemi sheish lo ezer shum negia. And he says that also the translators are going to distort it because they know that the goyim are going to read it, so they're going to not translate it accurately. And then he says. Okay, it says in the next paragraph, so if you skip the first 3 or 4 lines, he says, Gimel Yamim Chashach Yardag Olam. I'm in the last big, long paragraph, the 4th line. There were 3 days of darkness, Bishosh Yetziv Talmid HaMelech Targim HaTorah B'Shar Lashonos. When Talmud translated the Torah into different languages, V'ayin B'Piyut Shel Asarad V'Tevis. In the Piyutim that we say on the Torah V'Tevos, it says, Eskra mi matzok asher krone. I remember with bitterness what occurred to me. B'shloshes makas b'chodesh hazeh. 3 things happened to me in this month, of the month of Tevis. Diachani b'shmorabo smolos v'yamanis. Right and left, I was afflicted on the 8th day of Tevis. Halo shloshtam kavati tainis. And on all 3, I made a tainis. Umelch yavan ansani lichtov das yavanis. And I was forced to translate the Torah into Yavanis. You see that that was one of the 3 things, the tragedies that Torah was translated. But even though Rashi and Chumash says Torah was given in 70 languages, it's a terrible thing to translate it into a foreign language, into secular language. And then he says, Ibra on the bottom 2 lines. Ibra the Hey Hashem Einim Matzasi Davers and Befurish Bechazal. Vayom Hashem and Moshe Ksovach Advar Me'ela. So here he explains more what his main objection is. He says, the Medrash says, Echtov lo rubi rove torasi k'mozar nechshavu. There's a pasuk in Hosea that says, "You write the Torah and it'll be estranged from me." So Samar Yehuda Bar Shalom Kishamar lo Moshe Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Ksov v'cha bikash Moshe sheteham Mishnah b'ksav. Moshe wanted the Mishnayos to be in writing because that was part of Torah Shabbat Peh. Ufi shetzafa Hakadosh Baruch Hu Musa Olam Asidim with Targim as a Torah Lios Karim by Yevanis the Heimomrim Anu Yisrael. The Ad Achshem Aznayim, what does that mean? William, Amalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Akamar Atamar Mishatem Banai Any Yodei Al Misham Mistorin Shali Etzlo Hein Banai Ve'ezu Hazu Mishnah. He said God, the Rebbeinu Shem didn't want them to write the Torah Shabbat Peh, because then the Goyim will take it and they'll say that this is our Torah, and it won't be anymore the property of the Jewish people. So he says in the next paragraph, he says, Hine Mavur, the Iker Shalo Nitna Mishnah B'Ksav, Shal Yuchu HaGoyim with Targim L'Shona Nehem HaTorah Sheba'al Peh, in order that the Goyim shouldn't be able to translate it, and the Jewish people will be strangers. Sheyomer Ha'akum Shehem Banu Shekadosh Baruch Hu. The non-Jews will say, we're the children of God. Kasher b'amasein harabim midush zetai nasam hasheker. That's exactly what they say. They say there's a new covenant. She'omrim shehem gam kein ma'aminim b'Torah shebesav. We also believe in Torah shebesav. Rak brit chadasha itam karas. God made a new covenant with us. Shehem the New Testament. Shehem Yehudim hamitem. And they're the true Jews. What's Rachman al-Tzan. Eladal zeh yesh lanu tanis hakadosh baruch hu mishach haTorah b'shal peh. So in response to that, we have the response that the Rebbeinu Shalom told us to give. And that is that you don't know how to, you don't have the Torah. So even though we're allowed to write down Torah Shabbat B'Ksav, that was because it was otherwise it would have been lost. And even when it was permitted to write it, it was only permitted to write it in either in Aramaic or Lashon Kodesh. So this is another objection to translating. There's one issue whether that the guy that there's an issue to teach Torah to the guy, but there's another issue is that it makes it the public domain of not only Klal Yisrael. It becomes everybody's free for all for everybody. Okay, then. Okay, so I would just summarize. So you see that these are some of the these, and we talked about all these. Oh, the other issue, the last issue is that by translating the Gemara, don't we have to be concerned that the Goyim are going to study Torah, and there's an Isser on a Goy to study Torah? So why we shouldn't be facilitating that? So there's a he writes the same Mishnah Halachos says on page 5. He says Bidvar Shel Achad Risha Shalom, the bottom paragraph. Bidvar Shel Osa Shechashadim B'Zeh Karbal V'Skil Lumot Torah Al Televizia. There's now television programs where this was written Tafshin Chav Daled, so that was about 55 years ago. 56 years ago. No, 58 years ago. So he says, Asher Chadash Nevi Karbo, V'Skil Lumot Torah Al Televizia, Ein Ze B'Chal Shas Lumot Torah L'Akum. Isn't there a problem teaching Torah to the non-Jews? Al Televizia Lumot Torah Gam L'Akum, because anybody could turn on. Okay. Radios. So you could also ask me about the radio, the Maishna radio and television. I don't know if it's still on, but Lubavitch had every Sunday. They had a Lubavitch program with in Yiddish, and radio kvar nira kvar hatira haperusha ma'israel, and many people gave shiurim on the radio. So he says, "V'hine afshe ein hazman grama ke'eis lava barichas." He wrote this tshuva. It says on the first in small print up on top. It says it was Erev Yom Kippur. So he says, I don't have much time to write. He says, I have a moment, so I'm going to explain. So he says, okay, here he says that there's a problem with Iver. And then in the next paragraph, on the next column, he says, El Dani Omer B'zeh Svar Yishar, the Nili Chadish. She says, but I have a svar to say why there's no problem of teaching Torah to a guy by being on the radio or on TV. It's only if your intention is to teach the goyim. If the guy, if you didn't invite the goyim to watch it, they turned it on their own. There's an issue for the guy to study Torah. It's not our problem. Our intention is that the Jews should listen to the program. And he says, especially in this situation where this is an opportunity to reach thousands of Jews. So because a few Goyim non-Jews are going to tune in, so there's no issue because there's a mitzvah to study, to teach Torah, and therefore it's not a problem.
Why does the kavanah matter?
Because you're not teaching it to the guy. You're teaching it. That's not called that you're teaching it to him. It's if you're teaching. Let's say you're giving a share, and the guy comes and listens by the window. So he's the one that's I'm not talking to him. I'm not talking to the goyim. I'm talking to the Jews. I hear what you're asking. I thought about that also, but it seems that he holds it because you're directing what you're saying. That's not called that you're teaching the goyim. Rav Teitz on the next page writes the same exact thing. He was on page 6.
It's not like secretion because you don't know for sure a guy is going to come in.
Yeah, but
it's not mukhrach that a guy is going to come listen to your shir.
Yeah, but I would think that he would say, even, let's say you have an outdoor event and there's a microphone and a guy walks by and he's listening. You have to stop the shir. You have to say, sir, would you please cross this?
Like when you're putting it into usually those events, that's not a thing. But if you get up in the middle of a park, whatever, and start getting over Torah, right, then wouldn't that be giving over Torah to God? It's the same.
He's saying because it's not. Domain. It's true. It's a public domain, but it's primarily intended. Most of the people who watch that are not non-Jews. It's.
What about if somebody who's considering becoming a Ger?
Yeah, so that's a big question. What's the heter to teach somebody who's considering becoming a ger? Why are you allowed to teach somebody? So the poskim say that since it's necessary for the person, the Marsha asked that question in Shabbos, but the teretz seems to be because since that's facilitating their ability to go to gerim. There is no other way for them to become gerim. I mean, it needs a little bit more explanation, but that's the basic reason why.
It has to manifest that they're serious and they have to sign up and they have to take their own steps.
Yeah, and also they have to know something. If they don't know anything, how are they going to become gerim? So they have to study something. So if tight, what?
Hillel, right?
Right, he'll study with the ger before he's God. That's the Marsha asked. Why did he study with the ger? The ger wanted him to teach him the whole Torah regel achas. So he taught him Hafta Recha Kamocha, and the rest is Peres Zil Gemor or by the Sunny Loch, not Hafta Recha. So that's what the Marsha asked. So why was he allowed to teach? The Marsha has to discuss. Some say that he taught it to him after the Geras when he told them the Ma'id Sunny Loch, but the Pashtus is that he taught it before the Geras. So that's the Marsha asked. Why was he allowed to teach Torah to God? But it's generally assumed that you're allowed to. I mean, that's common practice now. That somebody wants to go through Geras, you teach him Torah. So let me just show you. Rabbi Teitz wrote an article in Hamor, which is also a Torah journal. So he says the same question. On page 6. Iyos l'ilmod Torah Am Yisrael b'radio. Is the right to teach Torah on the radio? So he says, "Mi'os ischalti l'ilmod estaf ha'shavua me'al gali radio ani mamshech l'kabel mechtavim miyichida b'tei knesset zechar Shas." From the time that I started to do daf ha'shavua once a week, I receive all sorts of letters. Behem mevaksha osi l'lamid b'sfas Anglis ha'shaletes chatzisha nosefes milvad l'shir b'yiddish. He gave his share in Yiddish. They wanted him to give an English share. She says, the next paragraph. Even though a lot of people asked me, he said, first I have to clarify whether it's permissible. I resisted doing it in English, but he says, Mispar has reached there's hundreds of requests. Okay, the Chlavim they got see Shezu if they are Rabbanim Agonim. Yeshlim so Heter was by Dezen Nefshar Harchiv Eschugi Lomedaf Shul Alfei Rivos. This way I could say this year for thousands. V'hine Achshash Issa Sheshu B'Zehu Mibnei Shaydei Shel Halimod B'Svas Amidars Yazina Gilmod Targam B'nei Nechor. The non-Jews will listen. The guys also have Kavur B'Sanhedrin. The Chaim Pasuk Haram Alacha. So he says in the next column, in the Etzem Isra Lamed Torah who borrow Pashav and Tzar Lifnim, Umasha Rana Lachmed is who Rak Hova Hagom, Limin Ayadei Tachas Radio, Kazu Shirak B'nei Yisrael Regil Mahakshiv. Since the primary audience are the Jews, Valimid who Beikar B'Shvil Yisrael, and the purpose is for the Jews, El Shagam B'nei Necha Yakshivu is that, but there's certain non-Jewish people might tune in. Afshein Alibu Babishum Yesh V'Zeiser. So he says, L'chara Yesh Havi Raya, the Babin Gazay, Shum Yisrael, he brings a Raya. But you're asking why if they're listening, it should be usher. He has a riot that's mutter, beautiful riot. The Yushalmi. So Eved Ola Minyan Zion. The Yushalmi says that an Eved can have an Aliyah. So the says, Lokain Amar Rav Chama Bar Ukva B'Shem Rav Yossi B'Rechina also L'Amid Savat Torah. So Rav Chama disagreed. He said, you're not allowed to teach an Eved Torah. So Tiftar Shaloma Me'elavo Shalomdo Rabo Ketevi. So he said, if Yishami says if he learns on his own or his Rebbe taught him like Tevi, so then he could have an aliyah. He says the Pirush Karbaneda Kishay Regamim Lamis Im Chacham Mishama Tevi Avdo V'Havi Kamal Lomed Me'atzmo. So how did Temi become a big Talmud Chacham? Because he used to listen to the Shiurim. Rav Moshe brings out actually the same right. Rav Moshe says the same thing, that if you have somebody that's if you're teaching a Jewish class and if there happens to be some non-Jewish kids in the class, then you're allowed to teach the class because he brings the same right from Tevi. That you see that if Tevi he overheard the conversation. So even though Rabbi Gamliel knew that he was listening, he was coming to Talmud Chacham.
Why was he allowed to listen though if he was there?
Oh, why was he allowed to listen? Why was he allowed to listen? No, but there's an Isra on the guy to study Torah. That's a good question. I don't remember if Ramosha addresses. I don't know if I have Ramosha in
It
here.
seems like
That-
it's easier.
That's a good question.
He was about. Oh, you could
The
also
Rashi
say he was,
says
he was,
there's
gonna- he
no-
was about to become a
The Rashi
ger.
says it's only lifting Iver if you intentionally teach him, but if he comes on his own to learn.
And Rabbi
There's,
Gamliel took him for the minion. And he,
Oh, here,
he converted
Ramosha, I
him.
have it on the last page.
Last page,
Yeah, but if I'm on the phone. Alma came to Ramosha Hilagami, but Asal Nasa Ashi the Tebi Hajan Nisham. No, but he doesn't explain why Tevi was allowed to.
Which one of the seven is the overall? Is it Zayol?
Oh, which is it? Gemara learns it from a pasuk. I forgot which pasuk.
It's got to be one of the seven, right? I don't.
I don't remember. I don't. Yeah.
What that he's over on?
No, the Yisr to learn the Torah.
Oh, that's from because Marasha.
Yeah, because Marash Akilas Yaakov.
So, but is that the eighth or is that? I said it's only seven. This is no.
Only seven is
It's gotta be one of the seven.
Right. No, so not sorry.
All right, after that, okay.
Right.
So-
Yeah.
No, he said it's
Oh, yeah.
Rosh.
Right.